It is officially April, it is officially spring, and I wanted to share some of my favorite books and movies to watch this time of year. So the first movie is called Our Little Sister. I just recently watched this movie. It was on my spring watch list and it immediately became one of my all-time favorite movies. I absolutely adored this film. Usually when I watch movies, I find myself thinking about other things, looking at my phone. I was locked in for this movie, and that is saying something because it's very slow paced. It's a real slice of life, and I just found it so engaging and engrossing. These three adult sisters live together in this beautiful old house in Japan, and when they attend their estranged father's funeral, they meet their teenage stepsister and invite her to come live with him. And this movie honestly feels like a live-action Miyazaki meets Little Women. It's such a beautiful story about sisters. It's a really thoughtful, tender, quiet coming-of-age story. It has almost like a feel of fantasy, like it exists in this matriarchal utopia. It's a very cozy comfort watch, but it's also very grounded in reality and I think very much about the difficulties and challenges of life. It's very melancholy without being too sad. It's very thoughtful. I think slower slice of life movies can feel sometimes very unintentional and kind of random, and this movie is all of these snapshots and simple moments of life, but it feels so intentional and just creates such a strong understanding of who these characters are and such a strong sense of family and sisterhood and growing up, and it's just absolutely delightful. They live on the water, they go to the same diner every day and get fried fish. I don't remember the fish. I love this movie. This is my number one recommendation right now. Go watch Our Little Sister. My next recommendation is another movie I just watched very recently called The Ballad of Wallace Island. This is currently out in theaters, so you should go see it. I don't know if it's getting that much attention, but it has all of my attention. The premise of this movie is that an eccentric millionaire invites a former folk duo who were in a romantic relationship but now have broken up as a couple and a band. Without their knowing, he invites both of them to come play a private concert for him on a remote island in this beautiful old estate that he lives in. And it's one of my favorite movie houses. Incredible performances from the three leads. For me, the perfect blend of comedy and melancholy. It's really, really funny. I was crying, laughing, but also crying. Just really heartwarming, and again, it has that kind of cozy, rewatchable feel, but is also really thought-provoking, and I think really gets into the difficult parts of life. I feel like sometimes with these cozier movies, people sometimes dismiss them as well, that's cute, but it's not really about anything, and I think this movie's about everything. It's about memory and nostalgia and lost love and lost versions of yourself and fame and celebrity and the power of music and the poetry of the past. I found it so moving and also so funny and entertaining. Young Girls of Rochefort is a 1960s French musical set in a seaside town. It is so delightful. The music is so fun. The colors are incredible. It's one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen. Has very much a Wes Anderson feel of that very well executed, meticulous aesthetic and color scheme. This always just puts me in such a good mood. It feels like a sunny day streaming through your window and a fresh bouquet of flowers. It's just so lush. It stars Catherine Deneuve and Gene Kelly, two all-time greats. The plot isn't so important. A carnival has come to town and Catherine Deneuve and her real-life sister play two sisters. One is a ballerina, I think, and one is a music teacher, and they dream of moving to Paris and starting their life there. It has different intersecting love stories of the people in the carnival and the people who live in this little town. It has very much a La La Land feel as well, of dreams and lost love and music and colors. It's just really wonderful, and definitely if you're looking for something uplifting and more cheerful. Right now where I live, it's still freezing. I don't physically feel the warmth of spring yet, so that's definitely something I'll put on to get in the mood. Love and Friendship is a Jane Austen adaptation, and I think it's one of the more underrated Jane Austen adaptations. I think everybody's pretty familiar with Emma and Pride and Prejudice. This stars Kate Beckinsale as a widow who is doing a lot of strategic calculations, maneuvering to try to finagle a wealthy husband for herself and her daughter. It's made by Whit Stillman, who made one of my favorite movies, Metropolitan, and has a kind of similar comedy of manners. I think it's one of the adaptations that best captures the satirical humor of Jane Austen's work and really isn't trying to be this grand love story of heroes and heroines. I think it's more willing to make fun of its leads the way that Austen's novels do, as opposed to wanting you to be really bought into the romance and the idea of somebody like Lizzie Bennet as a heroine. It's really, really funny. This is the Austen adaptation that makes me laugh the most, I think, maybe after Emma. This has everything I love about an Austen film, the estates and the costuming, but really is focused on the ridiculousness of society, which I think is the genius of her works. I think I put it in my second favorite Austen adaptation after Emma. I don't know if that's crazy, but I think it's really well done and really captures her wit. A Tale of Springtime is a French film directed by Eric Romer. He made a set of 4, A Tale of Spring, Winter, Autumn, and Summer. I really like Springtime especially. Obviously, perfect for spring. It's about a young philosophy teacher who has kind of a difficult relationship with her father. She doesn't really like his new girlfriend, who is a lot younger and closer to her age. And she meets this girl at a party and they become quite close. And as she brings that girl into her life, she struggles to kind of navigate these different relationships. It's really quite an intimate film about just these 3-4 people spending time together in France in springtime. The settings are beautiful, the apartments and this older country house that they stay in. And it's one of those classic French movies, not a lot happens, but there's 300 pages of dialogue, a lot of people just kind of arguing and debating different ideas. She's a philosophy teacher, so it does get kind of theoretical at times, but I found it still very grounded and really interesting story about female friendship. Those friendships where you meet randomly and bond instantly and then spend a ton of time together and then you're like, wait, I don't know that I really know you. Yeah, I don't know if anyone can relate, but I found that relatable. Another beautiful coming of age movie about young women figuring it out. I mentioned this film briefly in my last video, but I wanted to give it an actual recommendation. It is called My Brilliant Career, and it is, I think, one of the most underrated period films of all time. It is set in Australia, and it's about a young woman who is sent to live with wealthier relatives, hope to marry off to a wealthy, nice man, but she has dreams of becoming a writer. Very Jo March coded, classic period drama where you've got nothing else to do but go live with your wealthy relatives. The aesthetics in this movie are incredible. This is one of my favorite renderings of a time period. This movie and Age of Innocence, I would say, are the best historical staging, set dressing. It's a little bit unexpected. It doesn't go, I think, exactly where you think it's going to go. I think period dramas can be a little bit formulaic. And I love Judy Davis's performance in this. It's so natural. I think period dramas can sometimes be a bit stiff and the characters can feel a little bit like caricatures, and she gives the most natural performance and it just totally immerses you in the time period and the character because of the way that she plays it. I think it's a very familiar story of a woman who goes against the grain of society and wants to pursue her own dreams and reject social norms, but is done in a way that feels refreshing and fresh and a little bit different. There is a romance that's really interesting, but it doesn't totally take over the movie or overshadow what the larger themes of kind of figuring yourself out are. It's one of my favorite movies. It's really, really wonderful and the perfect movie for spring. Now for books. My first recommendation is Aline Veer. This is an 1889 Dutch novel. It's set during the kind of golden age of the Dutch Empire, which was something I was actually not all that familiar with. I was trying to read a book from every country last year, which is how I ended up reading this book, and I think it's maybe less talked about because it's a Dutch novel. doesn't have that classic society setting of New York or London. Aline, the titular character, is this passionate, kind of rebellious, but very dreamy young socialite who is struggling to kind of balance reality and her dreams. It feels very much like a Jane Austen novel. It's a lot of going to balls, a lot of suitors who disappoint, a lot of money, and yet financial anxiety for a woman who doesn't really own her money. It's quite an epic. It takes place over a long period of time and is really just so immersive. I found it really interesting just as like a historical read and understanding what life was like in the Dutch Empire in that time. Felt very modern, almost a little bit more modern than an Austen novel. Obviously it's a bit later, but there's this opening scene right at the beginning of the book. This is what really like hooked me. She becomes obsessed with this actor that she has seen on stage that she thinks is just like the most handsome, incredible man she's ever seen in her life, and is like obsessed with him. And then she runs into him just like walking by him in the woods, like on one of her like daily walks, and up close realizes that he's just like not that cute. And is just like kind of awkward and weird in person, and she experienced like the most vicious ick of all time and is just like thrown off for weeks by the fact that her crush was not as cool as she thought he was going to be, which I found very relatable. Always like having the biggest expectations and then being so frustrated when it doesn't play out the way she wants. And I've never really quite read a character like this who is like very rebellious and tempestuous and moody, but also like a very imaginative, flighty dreamer. With characters like Jo March, who are really moody, they are kind of cynical or like not bought into the whole society thing. And then characters like Amy, who are positioned opposite to Jo, with her kind of desire for wealth and praise and admiration and glamour, and like those things are kind of at odds. And in Aline, they exist all at the same time, which means she's a very like chaotic person, and this is a very sad story as well. It's a bit more serious and a bit darker than like Austen's novels. It's truly a journey. You will live in this world for a long time and think about it for a long time after, in my experience. And speaking of stories like that, my second recommendation is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is one of my favorite books of all time, probably like in my top 5. This is about a woman named Lily Bart who is born well off but struggles financially later in life. It's a real tragedy, kind of follows her fall from grace over the course of 2 years. It's a lot about New York society and how women were expected to navigate that and how limited they were in their options even when they had money. Classic literary trope of the struggle between love and money and wanting to marry for love but needing money to survive. I again love learning about the historical time period and what life was like in New York and what elite society looked like and how they kind of destroyed themselves. But also at the center is this character that feels very timeless and relatable. I think this novel really is a critique. It's pretty scathing. I think in a lot of ways Edith Wharton is mocking the upper class. I don't think Lily Bart is supposed to be admirable or a heroine, and I really love like the anti-heroine stories and stories about women who are really flawed, self-destructive, or ruining their own lives. I don't know what that says about me, but those are my favorite kind of stories to read, and I think House of Mirth is a real genius of parody and sincerity. I think there's so much sympathy in this book and also so much disgust. This to me is like the novel of the Edwardian era, and yeah, I love books about rich people ruining their lives. Can't get enough. My other classic literature recommendation is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was published in the 1860s. Centered on the story of Molly, who is the young daughter of a doctor in a small provincial English village who remarries a woman that Molly doesn't particularly like, but she forms a very interesting relationship with her stepsister, Cynthia. Again, another to me, highly entertaining, thought-provoking story of pursuit of marriage and different suitors and complicated relationships and discovering these kind of family secrets, and just really captures life in this village in England in the 1860s. I actually wrote half of my dissertation on Elizabeth Gaskell's house in Manchester, which led me to do a real deep dive into Elizabeth Gaskell, and I think she's one of the great forgotten female writers. She was really popular in her time, was heralded as like the next Jane Austen, and then really fell off. She was pretty controversial. She had very progressive views, especially was very focused on issues of the working class, conditions of poverty in England, and has been kind of reconsidered in the last 70 years as a very important voice in literature on issues of feminism and class inequality. Just the kind of thing I like in spring. Young women being friends, trying to find husbands. Another book I want to talk about is called Twig. This is a really wonderful story about a young girl who has a very active imagination and creates all of these magical made-up worlds in her backyard. This is one of my favorite books from my childhood, and is just one of those delightful, cozy, beautiful reads. One of those stories that just really captures children's imagination and how magical the world can be when you're young, and how limitless and exciting, and especially this time of year, I think it's the time when I want to reconnect with that kind of mindset and feeling like a sense of fantasy and wonder that maybe dies a little bit in the winter. As the world comes back to life, I like my imagination to kind of come back to life. There's really no better place to do that than in a children's story. The Enchanted April is an early 20th century novel about women living in England who are really miserable and unhappy and unfulfilled in their life and their marriages. And they go on vacation to Italy and go on this journey of self-discovery and connection. It's just really beautiful. It's also really funny. Dry English humor was making me like laugh out loud. The Italian setting is just so lush. I just love stories about women, especially later in life, having this coming of age moment, or this, and just this idea that like it's never too late to kind of figure yourself out or have really special moments of growth and discovery. It's very English, you know, little moments of awakening, you know, they kind of peel off a few of the layers of repression. Not all, certainly. I just love a like English people go to Italy and experience feeling and passion setting. That to me is one of the great literary tropes. All right, well, those are all of my movie and book recommendations for spring. I hope you found something that maybe you didn't know about that piqued your interest. I'm wishing you a wonderful start to spring.